Hi, Jerry. Hi, Jeremy. How are you guys doing? I see a bunch of folks coming in, so I'm going to wait another maybe 10, 15 seconds as people are signing in here. This is a very timely topic. I think a lot of folks are looking at their progress as Q2's coming in and looking to see what the most important things are to make sure they hit their target at the end of the year. So, super excited to have you guys discuss this topic. Um, All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm Dana Marxer. I am the founder of ayeQ, and I'm very excited to be moderating this discussion with two men that are veterans in this industry and have a ton of experience that I think our listeners and viewers are gonna really be able to take away and impact their company. So thanks you guys for joining us. Let me just introduce you really quickly to our audience. So Jeremy Sharp is a seasoned CRO with more than 15, 20 years of experience scaling PE-backed B2B SaaS companies through rapid growth and successful exits. He's led revenue organizations across public, private, and private equity environments, driving major gains in ARR, retention, and EBITDA by aligning go-to-market strategy with operational excellence. Before joining ayeQ, Jeremy held CRO and executive sales roles at high growth SaaS companies like Energy Cap, Castellon Solutions, and Comply 365, where he consistently delivered double-digit ARR growth, improved net retention, and led successful go-to-market restructures. He brings deep expertise in RevOps, capacity planning, P&L management, and stakeholder alignment. And we're very lucky to have him at ayeQ. That's Jeremy. Let me introduce Jerry. Jerry and I actually worked together as CMO slash CRO at a very successful run about, what is it now, Jerry? 10 years ago,
11
something like
years,
that?
a little
Wow,
over,
time
little over
flies.
10 years ago. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so Jerry Ellis is a sales effectiveness coach. He is a seasoned executive sales leader with more than 30 years of experience helping B2B technology companies build high-performing sales team and close complex deals. He brings deep expertise across ERP, HCM, CRM, and SaaS solutions, paired with a proven ability to turn sales process into predictable, profitable results. As the founder of Trinity Sales Effectiveness, Jerry partners with SaaS companies to elevate performance through coaching, strategic deal support, and his Align selling methodology, which is a proven framework that helps sellers connect their solutions to real business outcomes. From Adobe to Zuara to Bassware, Jerry's led enterprise sales teams through every kind of transformation, and I've seen one firsthand. Today, he focuses on helping sales leaders and reps become more effective, more confident, more aligned to the customer. So those are the heavy hitters we've got on this call for our audience, and we're excited to have this conversation. And I'm actually, if we're our plan is to have about 30 minutes of discussion between Jerry and Jeremy, and then I'll moderate questions at the end. So we're preserving quite a bit of time at the end because a lot of folks asked, "Hey, I've got some questions I want to make sure get answered." So we're going to limit our discussion and then go into Q&A, and I'll moderate that section. So please enter your questions as we go along, and we'll answer them all at the end. So Jeremy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Dana. Let's jump in. So I'd like you guys to think of today as really a strategic gut check. Most of us are halfway through the year, feeling pretty good. Maybe some aren't feeling quite so good, right? But here's what we're going to cover. First, we're going to look at why solid growth plans can sort of drift off course. Then we'll break down the 5 warning signs that show something's not right. We're going to look at why traditional forecasting tools cannot necessarily help you course correct. And then what high performing teams are doing instead. But the real question isn't how did we get here? It's what we're going to do now to fix what's not working and end up finishing strong. Because the conversation is happening today at your board, and whether you're ready for it or not. So there'll be some patterns that you can listen out for today, because the challenges you're facing, you're not unique. We see them across the board. We talk to SaaS companies, we talk to service companies, we talk to enterprise companies, we're even talking to PLG companies. And everybody's chasing growth. Everyone's under pressure. The difference between hitting and missing the annual number is, are you willing to adjust the plan today? So this is a slide that usually hits people like deep in the stomach, right? By June, your targets haven't budged, but your pipeline probably has. Conversion rates are often trending sideways. You look at the spend, and let's be honest, marketing budgets don't necessarily map to measurable results. I spoke to a CRO the other day who recently said, we're burning through cash like it's Q1, but all I can see is we're feeding the funnel for September. And she also said that the forecast keeps changing because reality on the ground keeps changing. And the question is, are you reacting or are you getting ahead of it? So Jerry, you coach teams all the time through this kind of turbulence. If a CRO or a head of sales is sitting here and they say, you're already behind, but can I salvage this year? What would you tell them? How do they avoid overcorrecting or panicking?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I do have that conversation. I'm here in June. I'm having that conversation with all customers, right? Because everybody's doing an assessment of as you get to head into H2, what are we going to do? What planning? What do we need to do? And as you said, Jeremy, some of them are on track and they're looking to grow and accelerate that. But quite honestly, most are dealing with some challenge, right? And the headwinds are strong today. Markets change fast. So, but what I say or what we do really depends on their specific circumstances and the dynamics at play for them. So, are they a short or long sales process? Obviously a shorter cycle, you can actually build pipeline. So you can really start to look at how do we build, and that can impact H2. If you got a 6-month sales cycle, you're kind of looking at it from a standpoint of what I have is what I have for the balance of the year. There may be some exception to that, but you start with data at the end of the day. As we get into all of this, I kind of put the coaching element in 2 phases. One is, what's the data? What do we want to? How do we want to analyze the data? What are the data elements to help us for whatever the topic is? When we're really digging into what do we do and where do we do it? And so there's a data element for a shorter sales cycle. You're looking for what's hot right now. What's segment of our ICP is hot. What product is hot? Where do we want to double down on investment from a pipeline building, both sales and marketing standpoint? For a longer sales cycle, now you're living inside the pipeline, and so you really go to the health of the pipeline. Where's healthy pipeline that you really want to double down on the focus of coaching those deals, inspection those deals, et cetera. And then on that long sales cycle, and really in both of these worlds, looking at your install base, and again, it's the logic is right. Install base is going to move faster, but the install base is big, and so now we're going back to data. So white space is a data. What's playing in the marketplace? So what product should we focus on the space on our install base? So the data first, the white space of that, and then what are the other data elements, ICP, et cetera, that you might look at? So you start with that discussion of data, and then from that, now I get into a coaching of based on that, and sometimes you go into the data thinking, I know what the outcome is going to be, and that, but the data really guides you differently. And so sorry for long-winded there, but that's the conversation that I have, and I'm doing it today with several customers.
Yeah, I love that. It's great insight. Yeah, I mean, I think you're dead right. You know, you gotta drill this down to small packets and look at what's going to work for you. And it's great to have some options out there. Not all are going to work. Maybe just one or two. Maybe a combination of a couple. But I think that's great. So, all right. Well, I'll move on. So I'm not going to.
I said I would keep my mouth shut, but I just wanted to chime in on that. You know, what are you doing to fix it when the board asks that? And Jerry, to your point, backing what you're going to do to fix it with data and evidence is essential to answering board questions with confidence. And that's what they're going to expect.
100% agree.
All right.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'll keep my mouth shut now.
You're good.
No, you jump in whenever you like. So I like I said, I'm not going to read these out, but these are the things that have kept me and probably some of you awake at night, right? Your pipeline looks fine, but you know, and probably more than you're willing to admit, is probably a little BS, right? You know, conversions are lagging and nobody knows why. Spend is up, but you're only getting vague, attribution slides, and the insights, instead of what you really want is those sort of data-driven insights, right? One of the worst signs is your team is working hard, but there's no leverage. Activity is high, but progress is flat. The old don't confuse activity results, right? That's I don't think that's a rep problem. That's a system problem, right? The key takeaway here is that if one of these sort of goes off the rails, it turns red, it's probably just some kind of noise, right? Maybe there's just something out of sync. But if two or more of these turn red, then I think that's time for you to jump in, time for you for an intervention, right? So Jerry, how do you help a revenue leader reset expectations mid-year, right? It's not a conversation they want to have, but how do you do it without rattling the board or deflating the go-to-market team, right?
Yeah, the reality, right, is you got to reset expectations because you're not going to get to reset goals, right? They're not going to do that. Jeremy, you and I recently had that conversation. But and you really make a great call out is you got to have how do you reset expectations with your executive leadership team and your board, and then how do you do it with your team? They're different but the same. So the formation of that is that you've got to you in both cases you got to come with a new plan, right? It is. What are the new expectations, or what are the expectations now? So as you head into H2, what are our H2 expectations? We're setting those. You could almost set it as not a reset, right, with your team. But as we head into H2, let's talk about what our objectives and expectations are in H2. But the key to both is that you bring the plan. And that's what's going to instill confidence in both. And that, Jeremy, you called it out. How do you do it without undermining the confidence of the organization at both levels? And Dana, you said it. The board's going to want you to come with data, but they're going to want you to come with a plan, and that plan needs to be supported by data. And the same thing with your field. So, hey, we've got a half under our belt, or the better part of a half under our belt. We've just gone through what we did and what we accomplished, and here's our learnings. Here's what we're taking away. Here's what we've learned. Here's what the data's telling us. Here's what we're seeing in the marketplace, et cetera. Here's what's working, and we're going to double down on that. But here's our plan. And so I think that's the key, is that you come to that discussion with a plan, whether you're talking to the executive and the board or the team.
Yeah. No, I think, listen, nobody wants surprises, right?
Right.
And what you really want is that data to be driving you on a more regular, consistent basis. So we're not waiting till the end of the month or the end of the quarter to realize this. You're seeing this on a daily basis, and either A, you can get ahead of it, or B, you can start to talk about it. And I think that data is the key, and the regularity of getting the data and that sort of 360-degree view of data makes those conversations more structural than just kind of sort of gut feel.
Yeah, one thing before we move off of this, Jeremy, that I would say, and just kind of thought through this and literally doing this with one customer in particular right now, and doing some things, which is the one difference between the conversation with the board and the executive team versus the conversation with the field is with both it's, hey, here's our second half expectations and here's our plan to achieve it. But with the board, you also have to couple into that discussion, how are we not going to end up in the same place in H1 of next fiscal? What are we going to do over the course of the next 6 months to course correct for H2 and have a better handle and prepared, so next year at this time, as we come out of H1, we're not where we are today. Our business is more predictable. We're course correcting more along the way instead of halves, et cetera. And that we all know the tenure of CROs today is short and tight, and that at the end of the day is because boards lose confidence in CROs, and it's that last part that really instills the ultimate confidence, which is, here we are. I got a plan to get out of this, but I've also got a plan to keep from ending up here again. That's the difference, right? In a whole lot of things, and truly a difference in leadership. And it's the biggest challenge today for sales leaders, because to be able to do that, you got to step out of the current, you got to step out of today's forecast, and in parallel, while you're delivering that, you really got to go, how do I look at this differently? How do I get ahead of things so I don't end up here again?
Well, that's a great segue to the next slide.
Sorry, I got ahead.
You did. No. It allows me to set it up, right? You're dead right, because 10, 15 years ago, you lived and died by a forecast. Now that is no longer the case, right? The forecast is somewhat a given, right? But we're now looking another quarter, a half year, a year, or even 18 months ahead, right? And how are you going to be able to do that? So, forecasting is one of those things that looks solid right up until the very point of when it isn't, right? And it's a short-term view, but it's still something where, talk about casting aspersions against you and your career. Boards look at a forecast as like, this is table stakes. You should be able to get a forecast right. The problem we have is it shows where you're headed, but not necessarily why. And it doesn't diagnose the actual execution issues behind the slippages, right? That's getting into that DNA is what's valuable, right? It tells you what might happen if trends continue, but it doesn't tell you if those trends are still valid. Most forecasts are built on historical assumptions and rep subjective inputs, right? I mean, we've all said, and gone through, forecasts and everything like that, and seen that the reps have, missed out a field or put in their own interpretation of it. So you're subjected to that. They don't always pick up breakdowns in the execution, right? You can't model whether your current activity level is actually enough to support your bookings targets. So this is where a lot of the smart teams fall into this trap. They're running the numbers, but they're not modeling reality. So the question for you, Jerry, is, we keep hearing from leaders who say, we keep missing forecasts, and my teams getting defensive. So how do you coach them to improve like accuracy without turning it into the blame game, right?
Yeah. So I hope where I'm going to go is the answer to the question, Jeremy. If I'm not, bring me back on course. It was interesting. I talked to a CEO recently, and so one of the questions I often ask in starting a conversation, right, is, do you have slippage? Kind of everybody has slippage out of the quarter, but is that a big problem? And typically it is, right? And his response was, heck, our stuff slides into the quarter. So, and it really resonated and hit exactly a point that I think is critical today. And here's in the what I'm trying to do from a sales effectiveness perspective with customers. And I really think companies need to look at someone that owns sales effectiveness, and that's the term that I'm using. And I talked to somebody that's doing this job essentially inside of a company, and theirs is sales productivity. But here, let me describe what I think it is, and people can put whatever name they want, and then the benefit of it, right? So one of the things they own is enablement, because you got to find a place for that. But they aren't a sales ops or revenue ops person. Okay, they're a person that has the ability to bring sales expertise into that conversation, and this is where the critical piece comes from. So you have all eyes of the company focused on building pipeline, and that's led by marketing, but sales has their own build responsibilities. So you got all the marketing, all the sales, everybody's let's build pipeline, right? Because you got to have it. And then on the backside, you have all eyes of the company focused on the forecast. And the forecast is this quarter. So they're focused on this quarter. But there's, depending on the length of your sales cycle, is how much time there is between the building of the pipeline and the forecasting and closing of that pipeline. And the secret to having a forecast that's predictable and manageable and not missing it all the time is to be able to focus on those deals in the middle. Okay. And when you couple what ayeQ brings from a platform perspective to help with data, and you couple that with a sales effectiveness, and I'm using that term, but whatever term you want to put it in, but basically a sales leader that can help with that pipeline and nurture, mature, et cetera, coach those deals with the salespeople, that's the game changer at the end of the day. And here's what leadership will say, well, isn't that the job? Isn't that why we have frontline sales managers? But today, the quarter is what's important and urgent. And so that's where their focus is. What I'm talking about is important, but it's not urgent yet. And it's not going to become urgent until the quarter. And that is not going, there's nothing you can do to change that. You could, if you made smaller teams and gave a manager less teams, they would still live in the quarter, because that's the focus of the world today, and that isn't going to change. So having somebody come into that role that is in the middle, that doesn't attend to forecast or a pipeline build, their sole focus is in the middle, and then using a platform like ayeQ to really focus, to determine where they should focus. That to me is how we get out of this reoccurring, I've seen the movie every quarter span. And it's not a huge significant investment for a company to do, but the value of it is immense. So
yeah, look, I can
my
agree
soapbox,
more. I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
we've been conditioned for years. Like I think when I first started in sales, we did monthly forecasting, and then it moved to quarterly forecasting. I think there's a general trend and probably good practice to think about, what are we looking at 2-3 quarters, maybe even 4 quarters out. And I think you're right, the sort of short-term quarter by quarter is fine, but I also don't know many organizations that have 3-month-long sales cycles, right? So by the time you get to the quarter, you've already got what's in the pipeline is what you've got. Occasionally you get a few deals that come in, but more often than not, you're already dealing with it. So you should be able to forecast fairly accurately. What you should be looking at is next quarter, the quarter after that, and as I say, even maybe the 3 quarters out. So, all right, let me move on here. Oh, go on.
One more thing to add before we get off of this, Jeremy, is, and you, as you kind of alluded, we've been doing, both of us have been doing this for a little while. The origin of X coverage was never the coverage for a quarter, right? The origin of X coverage was how much pipeline do you need today, rolling 12-month pipeline, do you need today to deliver your 12-month number, right? Because then going into the quarter, it was, what do you have for this quarter? Some of that will close, some of that may slide, and some of that you may lose, right? But to your point, it's typically in the later stage, we should be able to have a predictability of which of those fall into those 3 buckets and some predictability. Today, what I hear sales leaders say, which I'm going to be really bold and say it's embarrassing. As a sales leader, it's embarrassing. What they say is, and I hear this all the time, I need to go into the quarter with 4X this quarter to deliver X. So I'm 25% effective and efficient and productive inside of 90 days. And sometimes that's the last third of my sales cycle. But in their defense, I'm going to go back to what I talked about in the last slide, which is they don't have time to work and look at it till it gets there. So they're not really able to solve that problem. And that's the other reason why you've got to figure out a way to get focused back in that out quarter to not just next quarter, but 2 and 3 quarters out. Jeremy, you said it. That's the criticality of it. And again, I'm going to come back and I'll pump ayeQ, which is you also need a platform that helps you do that. You need to know data is an element of it today. It's just not a gut feel play, and it's not just an inspection play, right? It's all those things.
Well, as before, you've done a great job of teeing me up on this slide. So you're right. Listen, the challenge that we have is, especially if you're in that sort of scale from 10 to 50 million, your role as a revenue leader, as a VP of sales, is very much wearing multiple hats, right? And you've got your job might have strategy associated to it. You're the chief hiring officer for the go-to-market team. You're also a line manager as well as reporting up. And so somewhere in there, how do you gain back time? And how do you what's the most useful part of your business is to be fed useful information, and that's really where we believe that RevOps automation can earn its seat at the table. It's not just about reporting; it's about the modeling, right? You're building a living system that shows whether your go-to-market motion is strong enough to hit the number. In short, what you're doing is it's connecting your particular dots together. You can see if your reps have enough pipeline coverage based on the actual stage velocity. It'll flag if conversion rates are tanking in real time. You can check if you have a resource or a capacity constraint before it costs you the quarter. One client modeled their pipeline versus rep capacity, and they realized they had 30% more inbound than they could realistically cover. Now, that's a pretty nice problem to have. So the solution in their example, it wasn't more about leads, it was about better allocation, right? So it's not magic. But what it is doing is it's finally treating go-to-market the way that finance and product treat it, which is with modeling, assumptions and that sort of real world feedback loops. So when you're Jerry, so when you're trying to decide whether to think about this, if do you decide to double down on what's working, or do you go fix what's not? How would you help a team?
Yeah, it's a great call. Yeah, something I always looked at things, Jeremy, is the answer is both, right? At the end of the day, and I would say, hey, you want to double down on what's working, and you want to figure out what's not working, and how do you work on what's not working without slowing down the double down, right? Because that you need that. I've always had a in quarter, out of quarter kind of focus. The deals of tomorrow are important today. So I think that's a key thing, that both of those are the answer. At the end of the day, if you don't focus on what's broken while you're doubling down, can you really, how much incremental acceleration can you get, right? But the fastest way to grow is to feed into what's working from what's not, right? So that's what I would say in response to those two. You got to focus on both, and you just got to do them not siloed per se, but you can't if you focus on one, you're going to slow the other, and that's a mistake long term.
Yeah, I think I'm going to throw something slightly controversial out here as well. It depends where you are in the life cycle of the business, right? And I'm trying not to get too controversial, but some of the listeners on this will be, maybe towards the tail end of the business life cycle before there's an impending event, an exit of some description. You might be encouraged to just double down, right? That might just be where you got to get to, knowing that the next group can probably start to fix things. So I think whilst you're in midstream, I think you're right, applying energy and effort to both, right? I mean, what you really want to know is what is working, so I can move the allocation of resources from one and put it on the good stuff, right? And then in the meantime, figure out what wasn't working. Is there a way of fixing it? That's midstream, but I think if you're at the tail end, you might just want to go double down and see what we can squeeze out of it.
There could be a variety of. I think that's a great call out, Jeremy, and there may be other reasons to just double down, right? I totally agree with that. I also think that on the fix what's broken side, what you want to look at is, what's broken and where is it broken? Because sometimes we see that something's broken. Hey, we're not good at discovery, as an example. So we need to improve. We're not coming out of the discovery phase. We need to go do that. So we're going to do a big enablement. We're going to pull everybody off the streets and enable them to do discovery, when the reality is that problem is in a segment of your team. So go focus that on that segment while you're doubling down with everybody. Now you're not just as disruptive with something you need to go work on. So there's ways, to your point, to not dilute the double down. And I also agree there are situations where that's where your focus should be solely.
Yeah. Yep. At the end of the day, we're there to create revenue as much as possible. So
100%. Never lose sight.
All right. Well, thinking about things which are broken, and what do you do? We can't wait for Q3 to tell us Q3 is broken. I mean, that's pretty blunt, but it's also very true, right? You can't afford to wait until August to realize that Q3 is off the rails, and you're going to end up with a shortfall. Right now, you should know where your deals are getting stuck. You should know which reps are, struggling with days in stage momentum. You should know which pipeline is real, right? Which has been stuffed in there, or which has been frankly just mailed in over the summer, right? That you know, we're hitting those months right now. We helped a client cut almost, I think it was almost 40% of their pipeline because it hadn't moved in over 30 days. And whilst that doesn't sound great, the flip side of it is it freed up time for them to focus on the ones which were real and drive better execution where it mattered, right? Another customer was had deals that were lingering in discovery for twice as long as they needed to be, right? And I don't know how many long, it was like 30 days or something like that. And it didn't turn out to be a rep issue, right? It was a process issue. It was something like kind of stuck that they just couldn't navigate around, or nobody put their hand up and said, this is the problem. But they wouldn't have known about it if they hadn't been watching the data, hadn't been looking at the velocity signals. So, cut the crap, right? Let's get serious about stage progression. It's not about more deals, it's about the clarity of what we see within there. So when Jerry, what are the earliest signs you look at in that go-to-market, that the go-to-market execution is off before the results crater? What should leaders be looking out for now, today?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a two-part answer, and I'll be as brief and quick as I can. So one is really the question you asked, and the other is the question that not necessarily that you asked, but they ought to be asking. Okay, and it's going to go back to some things we've said earlier. But so I just went through this with a company, and I'm in the throes of it right now. So coming out of May into June, they're looking at their Q3. And they don't have the coverage that they want. And their coverage number is a 4X coverage number. So to me, that's not the right number to begin with. And so, so I went through two things with them. One piece was I drew some pictures for them, and I said, you got 100% of pipeline, and you're going to close 25% of it if 4X is your number. That's what you're saying. So there's 25% of this that someone could go closed, lost right now off of data, and no one would know. Okay. And back to your point, you're now you're looking at a smaller set of data, a smaller set of pipeline, and you can increase efficiency and effectiveness. And I'm not saying someone should just go carte blanche close, but data can really identify, as you did for that client, data can help you identify how to shrink the population of opportunities down to things that really have, I use this term fog a mirror, they have real life, right? And now it is, from that standpoint, at that point, it's opportunities you're trying to close. And for them, it's in the next 120 days, right? This is a June 1 kind of start of a conversation. And so at that point, it is less about data, and now it's about execution. Right. So now it's, hey, we've created an area of focus, go execute, and your leaders should be able to do that, and they should be in next quarter by now, 30 days out. Okay. Now, the other thing that we did with them, and this goes to the second part, the question that you didn't really ask, Jeremy, but it goes back to how are we not going to end up here again? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the next thing that we did was we went to their Q4. And we said, we want to see early and mid-stage opportunities that are in Q4 that have had, and we used age and stage of 2 weeks or less. So today they're showing momentum and activity. And we said, if they're early or mid, and they have about a 120-day sales cycle on closed business, okay? Not their entire pipeline, but things that go to closed one, it averages about 120 days. So we said, hey, if you have something today that's in an earlier or that mid stage that's in your Q4 and is active, it's reasonable to say it could close in the next 120 days. So we took those, and the frontline managers are inspecting and coaching the mid stage because they're more mature, and I'm coaching and inspecting the early stage that are less mature. Their expectation is some of those will definitely come forward into Q3 and increase their Q3 pipeline with healthy activity. And the likelihood with what I'm spending time in, I'll be maturing things for Q4, but I might yet find some things that could be brought forward either now or as we are investing in those opportunities. And so that is what I would tell them to go do now for now, and how to look at that future wise as well.
Yeah, that's extremely valuable. And I think we've gotten ourselves not dissimilar to how we think of forecasts every quarter as opposed to 2 or 3 quarters out. We've also thought of forecasting deals which are in that sort of mid to late stage, as opposed to really inspecting the ones early on and just hoping to some extent that they will meander into the mid stage. What can we do to encourage stages 2, 1 or 2, to get into 3 and 4 in the next 120 days? So it moves it from a Q4 to a Q3.
Right.
So I think you're right. There's definitely nuggets out there that more often than not, we don't put enough management or enough tutoring into to encourage them to have a bit more velocity that could naturally bring them in earlier, rather than just waiting for them to be ready. So I think that's great insights, and I'm glad you asked a question that I hadn't. All right, so move on to really what can we do? Let's not complicate this, right? So the leaders who are still in the fight today are doing what I would think we've got five things, right? They're focusing reps on the right part of the funnel. So we just talked about that, right? They're using velocity metrics to coach in real time, so kind of tied to it, right? They are resetting maybe goals, maybe targets. I'm not, depending on the appetite, but they're doing it based on actual conversion data rather than just kind of, I don't want to say hope, but maybe there's a little hope in there, right? And then they're reallocating budget to the channels that are working now. So that idea of like, what is working, what isn't, let's double down on the stuff that is working today. And then, they've purged the stale pipeline. I think it's a tough thing to do. I've done it many times, more often than not when I first joined an organization. But when you're sort of midway through the run, it's tough to say, we're going to go purge one more time. So either you do it as an amnesty up front and then you continue to purge, or you're going to have to face the same thing in an 18-month roll where you're going to have to purge one more time. But it needs to be done, right? That purging is a very healthy thing to do, and if you can be doing it along the way, so much better than just in big clumps. So this isn't blind optimism. It's about tactical visibility, and it requires clarity, decisiveness, and really the execution and the follow through. And in the very bottom line there, if anybody's familiar with the late great Rick Page, he had a book that was called Hope is Not a Strategy, and I was fortunate enough to meet him. So hope is not a strategy, but visibility is. So final question from me to you, Jerry. Let's say I'm a new CRO. I just inherited this messy Q2. What should I focus on first to build credibility, and then what do I do to set the back half of the year up for some sort of impact?
Yeah, great question. But before I answer, I just want to. So Rick Page was a really close personal friend. I worked for Rich. I was trained by Rick in 1990, before he wrote the book and after he wrote the book. And I worked for Rick for 2 years and sold and delivered that methodology at the complex sale. And so thanks for calling him out. When I saw the quote come up on the slide, he's who I thought of, and I appreciate you calling him out. He was a great man. So back to your question, I got a new CRO that comes in. What I would tell you is I think most new CROs come in with a good plan and probably the right plan, right? They're thinking what you just kind of outlined. I got to go get the pipeline cleaned up. I have an opportunity to blame the predecessor, the previous regime for this mess, right, that I've been inherited. And for all those listening, my apologies for harsh terms like that. We all do. There's a ton of everybody's are good leaders out there. The challenge is the market, where we're at today in the world, which we've talked about. So I won't go back to that. But here's the piece that I would tell the new sales leader is figure out how to get above the grind and focus above the grind, because your replacement is going to have the same plan, and the timing in which that replacement gets here is based on whether you get caught in the grind and what you do today. If you don't keep doing that going forward, and you do it once right, and then you get into the grind, then you're going to live in the forecast, not in the pipeline. You're not going to be out ahead of it, and you're going to end up, and once you are consumed in the grind and behind, it's really hard to go, now I'm going to do what I told you when I started. And so go be true to it. And I'm going to tell you I'll tell you the three key things to being successful of doing that. Okay. And I'm not going to prioritize them because I think they're all important. Okay. Go build a relationship with the CMO. Okay. You can't do this alone. You have to have a relationship with the CMO. The second is get a platform like ayeQ that you both can share, and so you have a common system of truth, and you have a relationship of delivery of company goals. And no company goal is a pipeline. Company goals are revenue. So have a common relationship and a common goal of the revenue, and have a platform. And then the third thing is go find someone that can be your, my term, sales effectiveness person that can sit with you and the CMO and nurture and mature and enable and do the things that you don't have time to do. And that's, to me, how you actually get out of the grind, because you're going to live in the grind. You can't avoid it as a CRO. It's what do you do that to enable above the grind? And the three keys are relationship with the CMO, a platform for system of truth that the two of you agree on, and a common goal to achieve revenue, and then find somebody that can partner with the two of you to go achieve that. And that person, a lot of people will say, well, that's my RevOps person, and they're in that group, but they don't typically have the sales experience to really be the person to help you with that. And I think that's the secret of the sauce.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. And we can fall in those traps of not being able to see the wood for the trees. As you say, you get sucked into the grind, and you either gotta pump the brakes, or you gotta have somebody that every now and again drags you up by your collar and says, have a look at this. You're going down the rabbit hole, but we've got to look at the bigger picture here and see what it is we can fix long term as well. So, all right. Well, those were the end of my questions. Dana, how are we looking out there?
Terrible on time. So I was going to stop you and interrupt and say, hey, let's do a time check. But what you guys were talking about, we're actually answering a lot of the questions that I've seen coming in. So I decided, I made the executive decision to not interrupt you again. But please, for our audience, we'll stay on can you guys stay on for a few extra minutes and answer a few questions?
Absolutely.
Perfect. We'll take a few. If you have a question and you haven't put it in the chat, please do. And while we're waiting for folks to enter their questions, I just want to mention our ayeQ health check. So one thing that we often hear from CROs and RevOps leaders and even CEOs is, I know we're not quite on track, but I'm not sure what to fix first. And Jerry, this is all around the three elements that you just talked to. And one key piece is that source of truth and being able to bubble up these answers without the huge time and effort sink to try and put together and stitch together data from multiple systems and spreadsheets. That's out. That's yesterday. So we do offer an ayeQ health check, which is just basically a structured review of your current growth plan, your targets, and your performance data. And we show you where the gaps are, where you're strong, and where a quick course correction can make the biggest impact. So priority of resource allocation to make the biggest impact in the second half of the year. Please, if that sounds helpful, schedule. I think on the screen you see how to schedule a quick consultation. We'd be happy to chat with you. So I'm gonna start asking a few of these questions coming in. We'll take just a few extra minutes here to try and get some. First question, Jerry, you said start with data a lot. And this was earlier in the conversation, so I think you answered a bit of this, but the question is, can you unpack that? How do we get to the data we need? Where does it come from? Who produces it?
Yeah. So a little bit was that goes back to, the partnership with the CMO and the CRO and having a common platform. And typically you have marketing data and you have sales data, and sales management leadership should mostly reside in sales data and marketing data as they're doing their job. But it's, coming back to that, that I'm going to tell the board I'm in trouble, and here's my plan to get out of it in the near term, and here's how I stay out of it in the future, right? You got to have that in a single system of truth. And I can start, the way I get out of tomorrow is I start looking at today's MQLs, right, relative to conversion rates based on deals that go to close, from MQL to closed won. Those are the trends you want to see, not your entire pipeline. And now you can predict way earlier a challenge that's coming at you a quarter or two away based on your MQL to closed won. And now now the sales team's not making adjustments to make a quarter or a half, but the CRO and CMO collectively are making adjustments to get ahead of 2 quarters out. So the next half we're in a better place. So that's kind of high level, and that's that piece of it. I think I said it, but the other part of it is if I'm a sales leader and I'm in the pipeline, age in stage is, to me, one of the most critical metrics when I start looking at data to health, right? It shows a level. If you can't measure activity in any other way, I've moved it from one stage to the next, is an indicator of health. The more incremental data elements that you can combine with age and stage. So if you can measure and gather into that real activity, we have email exchanges, we have meetings with them, etc. Right? We're sharing documents, not just an email, but there's an attachment. And AI, all that stuff can start to tell you those things. Where you can combine that, you're going to have a better indicator of health. But those are the two. That's kind of what I would say to in a single system of truth. Having a marketing database and a sales database is inefficient. There's a ton of manual work, but you'll never agree on the truth. And I don't know how you connect the dots when you have two systems that are measuring two different things differently.
Yeah, and I'll say that really is the problem that we've solved here at ayeQ.
100%.
That is, you've got the transactionals, as you know. So, the transactional marketing piece, the transactional sales piece, and being able to take all of that data up into an analytical environment to look at the end to end, just like you were saying, right, is that golden sales process. What is the gold standard that we want to measure all other activity towards, so we can see what we should focus on and what we shouldn't? And that's that modeling piece that has to couple the analytics.
Yep.
So let's take one more, and I know we are way over. We will get to all of these questions just so our audience knows. Let's take this one. Another data issue. How can I tell if our problem is not enough pipeline versus deals not converting? Either one of you want to take that?
You want to take that one, Jeremy? I took the other one.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you have to manage what you're measuring, right? I think it's always easy to say we don't have enough at the top of the funnel, and frankly, you can have a lapse process that will have deals just falling through the gaps. And I think with tight discipline, process monitoring, and technology that can drive back to you these results that say we expect to see individuals being able to convert X or Y amount of deals. And whilst not all creatures are created equally, you should be in some sort of plus or minus 1 or 2% of everyone else. I think if your targets are set up correctly, and if everybody is hitting those and managing to convert as you should do, and you're still not getting there, then maybe it is a pipeline issue. But it's too easy if you don't have the data to do that finger pointing, to play the blame game and somebody else. And it's always been the dog that got kicked was the top of the pipeline. And so I sort of take my sales hat off and put the marketing hat on and align with my brethren in marketing, as I have done, and say quite often it isn't the top of the funnel issue. It's more to do with how are we getting through them? Are we treating these with kid gloves? And are we really working every single lead? And you don't know that unless you're measuring the velocity through each stage, and you've got a process that's put together that says we won't exit one stage until we've completed all of these tasks. And for us to enter this stage, it's got to look like this. And I think when you're tight and you've got discipline around it, it's pretty easy to figure out where's the area that needs to have the work.
Yeah, and quite frankly, Jeremy, I'm sure you would agree, it's never either, it's always both, varying degrees, different times, and it goes back to the importance of the relationship between the CRO and the CMO, and that the common objective is revenue. So we have to have enough pipeline to work effectively to achieve that. We each have our areas of responsibility. We're never going to be perfect, and always trying to achieve excellence on our side, but in partnership, right?
Yeah, and what we see, if we go back to that slide you had, Jeremy, which was, plan, model, when everybody agrees on the model at the beginning of the year, there's already alignment that is supporting that. Jerry, you and I did that a decade ago, right? What does everything have to look like to hit our target? And when we are aligned, there's not the finger pointing, right? It's like everybody has their goal from the model. Where are we deviating from goal? Are we deviating over in marketing? Are we deviating over in sales? And then it's an objective conversation, not a finger pointing thing. So it really does impact that culture, and that sales and marketing alignment is when the magic happens. So
100% agree.
Yeah, so we are way over time. Jeremy, thanks for hanging in there. I know you made me a liar because at the beginning I said we were going to save a whole bunch of time at the end to take questions, but I think what you guys were chatting about is exactly what our audience came to learn.
I,
So
I'm, I'm sorry I killed us on time, Dana. I do all the time. My sincere apologies.
no
Thanks
worries,
for
all
thanks
is
for
forgiven.
thanks for letting me be here and pontificate on my beliefs and passion. And it means a ton, and I've really enjoyed it. Jeremy, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone
Uh,
who joined us today. Appreciate the time with us, and we hope you have some takeaways that will be valuable for you. Thanks. We'll wrap now and have a great day.
right. Bye.